On September 4th, a gunman who shall not be named entered Apalachee High School and ended the lives of four people in our community: two 14-year-old students and two teachers. One of the two students, whose name was Mason, was autistic. Today, we will discuss the incident that has put our community in national headlines and how we are processing the impact it has had on our children in the autism community. Due to the nature of the topic being discussed, this episode may not be appropriate for children. Let's get started. Hi, Embracers. Today is going to be a little bit more of a solemn episode. Usually, we like to joke around and make lighthearted conversation, but because this incident has happened in our local community, it's something that we felt we had to talk on, especially since it involved an autistic person, and we want to do so with as much respect as we possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely I would say the darkest topic we've covered ever. So, I mean, like, yeah, definitely one that hits hard, especially when it's, so close to home. When, we pass by the school when we're driving around town, kind of thing. So, um, yeah, it's definitely one that we've kind of reflected on over the last week or so. Kind of just putting our play or our reflection on like our own kids on how we would perceive or how they would perceive an active shooter in a school situation.
For those of you who might not be in the know or maybe don't follow the news or have somehow missed the headline, a quick summary for you. Um, Last week at Apalachee High School, which is a school that is local to us, it was our local sheriff's department that responded to it. It involved about 13 victims, I think was the latest number. Of those, there were four who unfortunately lost their lives. Two of them were students, two of them were teachers, and one of those students, as I mentioned, was 14-year-old Mason. Um, this has kind of resulted in a community trauma here. So, pretty much everybody in the community is talking about it. Everybody has been essentially touched by it in one way, shape, or another because we are a small rural area. So, we are a close knit community. It pretty much shocked everyone here because our community is known for being safe. One of the reasons we chose to move here is because statistically it was considered one of the safest areas or towns in all of the state. So it was definitely a shock to the community, and it's definitely something that has impacted special needs community as well, knowing that one of the victims was in fact autistic. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been thinking about due to that incident, a little bit about how it's impacted us, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, and just give a little insight there. But the first thing that I want to basically touch on that Matt and I kind of initially talked about was really that what do we do if our kids were in that situation? And that was really because of Mason and the fact that we found out that the shooter, who again we will not name because I don't want to glorify him or encourage any copycats, but he had just last year lived in our exact city. So, in our town, he was living in our town last year, I believe, and was kicked out of his home. And so I think they were renting and they got kicked out, so they had to relocate. But at that time, they had investigated and he had been making comments online about how he had wanted to initially target an elementary school. And so Matt and I are just reflecting on that and thinking our kids are currently in the elementary school that he more than likely would have targeted had he not, by some sheer fate, been kicked out of where he was living at the time last year. So it's extremely likely, like we were this close to it being our kids' school. So that's why it's something that we felt we had to talk about and has really kind of really hit close to home for us.
And it makes it hard because like I was gonna say at like the beginning of this school year, like we thought like in the back of our mind, we always knew like, okay, school shootings like pop up every once in a while on like a national level. But like I would say, like if you ask me like what is our biggest fear for our children in the school year, it's the socialization aspect, like, we always, like, are worried, like, "Oh, okay, like, will they be able to socialize with their peers?" Like, this is always kind of in, like, the background where we I mean, don't really think of it as, like, front and center as, like, a real fear because we're focused on all the other things as far as, like, making sure the kids are going to therapy and that they're doing okay, that their behavior is okay at school, that they're not getting kicked off the bus or anything. So it's, like, all these small little things when you think in comparison to, like, a school shooting that we're concerned about, not to mention the security of, like, the school and, like, their well-being on that level because we kinda put that just kind of in the background just in our lives, but now it's kind of, impacted us in a way where now we are kind of reflecting like, "Oh, like, this is a huge deal," because, like, in a true emergency situation, like, our girls are a very, very vulnerable, group, in general because we think about, like, if there was a school shooting at their school, they don't respond quickly when they're asked to do something. It doesn't matter if it's an emergency or if you're being very calm and directing them to do something. There's always a delay, so I can just imagine their teachers, trying to tell them, "Okay, you need to be quiet, you need to hurry over here," and our kids not understanding the importance, and they'd be loud, they would probably be potentially screaming and drawing additional noise, to the classroom. So just something kind of, like, reflects kind of in the back of my mind where it's like, what do you really do? How do you teach danger when they're not really picking up on, like, the concept of, like, what danger even is?
I feel like this is something that we largely cannot do anything about and is kind of outside of our control, which is kind of like the scariest thing because one of the things that I read about from the family, Mason's family on their GoFundMe, which we will link later, is that apparently, he was the type of autistic who really gets triggered by sound, alarm, and all sorts of things like that, so they had put on there, like, that he was missing, and if you approach him, do so calmly and quietly and not to directly go to him because he's at risk of elopement or he might, like, react negatively, essentially. So, for the kiddos who react that way in trauma, which I feel like our oldest is definitely like that, how do you prepare for that? And there really is not a good answer, honestly. I was thinking about it. Matt and I have been thinking about it over the weekend, and we're like, how can we possibly prepare our children for something like this? And I even feel like the school really cannot do much because let's say they have to be cooped up somewhere that's safe and they're hiding or something like that, our kids might be vocally stimming, they might be screaming, like our oldest child, if she's under a stressful situation, she goes into full meltdown where she will scream, she will refuse to take directions, she will just start scripting or echoing what people are saying, like, that is her meltdown mode, and there's just absolutely no way she would be okay in that situation. So it definitely has put us into a deep thinking mode where we're trying to figure out, is school really the best place for them? Knowing that if this would happen at their school, they probably would end up being one of the victims just given the fact that they're autistic.
Yeah, because I always think about, like, sometimes you hear of school shootings where, like, kids are hiding in, like, cupboards, for instance, and I'm just kind of thinking, like, would our kids, if they're instructed to hide in the cupboard, would they do so? And I'm like, they might because they might think, "Oh, maybe it's like hide and seek," because they're not understand the impact of it. But then they're not going to stay there for however long it takes for, law enforcement to get there. They might stay there for a few minutes, they might make a lot of noise, and some of these, I mean, schools, you can't really do much about that. Like, there's really not a way for them to be protected given the capacity of, like, their internal instinct. Like, I feel like that's kind of a drawback where they're not really able to stay focused on what that seriousness is to be able to take it seriously to try and either hide or run quickly or whatever the instructions are to how to get or navigate around the school. I feel like would either be lagging behind or they would be having behavioral issues that would further prevent them from doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah, and I mean, bless the students and the teachers who are there trying to do their very best in a chaotic situation because, I mean, what can you really do? And I absolutely trust that our teachers would do whatever they could, right? But you can only do so much, especially if you're responsible for 20 students and there's one that's perhaps getting away or doing the vocal stimming or whatever it may be that's perhaps drawing attention or not following directions and running into the wrong way. One of the things that we worry about our kids is they are not really great when it comes to stranger danger, and they don't really understand things like weapons or anything like that. Like, they're the type of people who will walk towards that or run towards that. They would give somebody a hug, not knowing that they're, like, quote, unquote, "the bad guy." So that's something that definitely stresses us out is that they don't really have that understanding of danger and the knowledge and instinct that even neurotypical children have, that if they see something bad, they run away. Like, we've seen those shows on TV of, like, the five-year-old who called 911 when their mommy fell. Our kids would not do that. Like, they do not understand that. They are more likely to think about their sensory overload, or they're more likely to think about their sudden change of routine. If there's alarms going off, if there's lights flashing, if there's people screaming, they're gonna just go into a sensory overload, and that's gonna be their whole world. And that is something that has definitely, I think, changed a little bit about how we were thinking about school moving forward. Not for the sake of the school itself, like, nothing the schools have done themselves, but more as a reality check that I feel like our kids as autistic kids are probably not safe in school because they're not really capable of really self-responsibility or self-reliance, if that makes sense.
Right, I was gonna say, I mean, also, like, I mean, okay, this incident happened, 4 days or whatever it was ago, but there's been, what, 6 other arrests from different schools, all because the kids online are making threats
In our
relating.
local area,
Right,
all in
that's what
our
I was
local area.
right, I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, it's like every single day there's even more arrests of kids who are making these kind of statements about school shootings and all this, and they're being arrested. So, like, there is some, like, validity to their claims that they feel like they should be arrested for. So it's just, it's a hard I mean, well, the decision is, I mean, easy. We want what is best for our kids because we want them to be protected, but it is a hard situation because there's really not a, like, great solution. Like, I mean, as far as, like, if we actually want them to be, like, in school, like, we can homeschool, like, definitely, and, I mean, we definitely had those conversations, but as far as, like, them actually going to school, I feel like that will always kind of be in the back of our mind because we know that in an emergency situation, whether it be a school shooter, a tornado, I mean, honestly, any type of emergency situation, we know, like, our kids are going to be lagging behind what the class is doing, and that could be the difference between them coming home at night and not coming home.
Yeah. Honestly, that day when it happened, we didn't really know until we got messages on our phone because our school gives us messages, and we basically found out that our school was kind of, like, on a soft lockdown. I don't believe they ever went on a hard lockdown, but, the incident was fairly close. I mean, it's a place we go to all the time, um, and, I think that once we saw that, I just kind of, like, didn't know how to react. I wasn't sure if we should be concerned enough to go and pick them up or if we should just let things kind of settle. We were just like turning on the news and trying to see everything that's going on. And we're like, wow, this is like right in our neighborhood. Um, and just processing all that information, it was kind of scary because it's just so happened that that day our kids had something called a glow run, which all parents and basically relatives were invited to, and so it happened to be that this was taking place during an event or a day that our kids' school was having an event that was open to the public, which meant there was gonna be very minimal security, because we've gone to these events and there really is not a whole lot of security when it comes to those. It's kind of like trust-based. Sometimes they do ID checks, but it's really not that great for events. Um, so we were a little bit worried. And then there was also this juxtaposition between what was happening on the news in our community and then the pictures that we were getting on the phone from our kids' teachers that was like them having fun at this event because they were doing a glow run, which is basically they get to wear all this glow in the dark stuff. They're doing laps to raise money for the school, and the kids had been looking forward to it. And I just like remember thinking like they have no idea.
Right.
Like I was just like, and I didn't want to burst their bubble because they were having so much fun. I was like, I don't want to tell them, and they're still in school. And then there was like all these parents they were initially planning not to take their kids out because the teachers had said, "Oh, we encourage you to leave the kids for the remainder of the school day." That was before they knew what was happening, and that was just the standard protocol. It was like, "Oh, we're gonna have this event in the school. We encourage that you leave their kids here to like finish up their school day. But if you want to take them early, you can." But then this event happened, and then it was all about, okay, we gotta get our kids early, this or that. We did not. We kind of grappled with the idea of whether or not we wanted to, but I felt like we wanted to keep things as normal as possible for our girls to avoid changing routine as much as possible because we didn't really know what was gonna happen in the next couple of days.
Right. I mean, honestly, like, the next day after, like, all the, like, news had come out and, like, I mean, I'd say, like, the dust kinda settled a little bit where we knew actually the details about the situation. We were debating, like, do we even send them to school the next day? Like, we weren't really sure, and we were having conversations back and forth with, like, their teachers asking, like, what, like, additional, like, security is, like, gonna be taking place at the school just because it was so close to the elementary school. And I mean, it's not a great feeling because it's always kind of up in the air. You're hoping for the best, but you're kind of just it's always just uncertainty.
Yeah, I think what was really hard about that for me was, like, knowing that the person had lived in our town and had wanted to target an elementary school, and also, early on, there were kind of rumors going around that he wasn't acting alone, that there was potentially other people involved, and that they had a list of schools in the local community that they had wanted to target, and that Apalachee was just the first on that list, which it did turn out to be the first on the list, so it made it sound more valid, and on that list, there were schools right in our local area, like, our our
Our
community
high school,
schools.
right.
Yeah, like, right down the street from us next to our kids' school, and so we were really stressing out. I was having a bit of anxiety just thinking about, like, do I send them to school? Do I not send them to school? Do I tell them? Do I not tell them? And it was so stressful for that couple of days. That's why we weren't really, like, posting much, and, we kind of took a breather because my mind was kind of trying to sort out what is the best response for our kids, and we kind of just landed on, given their age and the fact that they're so young and the fact that they're autistic and don't really understand a lot of this that's going on, we didn't really feel that it would benefit them telling them. I mean, I don't really think that they would get much out of it other than unnecessary fear or anxiety, especially our oldest one, where if you tell her something, she just locks onto it. And 99% of the time, she locks onto the negative and completely ignores any of the positive that you say after that. So, because of that, we decided not to tell them. Um, it was a little tricky this morning because the whole county decided to wear the Apalachee school colors, to honor them, and so our girls were going to school wearing the school colors, and they were asking us why, and so I was trying to explain to them like, "Oh, we're supporting this school." They're like, "Why?" And I didn't tell them. I just didn't feel like I should.
Well,
I
I
basically just told them that, we wanted to support them.
well, I don't think that they would understand either, because the other thing is, like, they don't really understand, like, the concept of, like, death, though. Like, that's,
Yeah,
like
they don't.
they have not grasped that. Like, I mean, we talk about, like, for example, like, your dad, he passed away, and we talk about, like, "Oh, he died," like, but they don't really, like, grasp, like, what does that actually mean? And, I mean, I think it also kinda ties in I think it also I think it also kinda ties in because, like, when we go to church, they reference as far as, like, Jesus and, like, the different prophets and whatever, but they reference, like, "Oh, they died," but they don't really, like, connect, like, when you die, you're gone, and, like, that's that. So I feel like even if we were to tell them, like, "Oh, like, these students and these teachers, had been shot and killed," I don't think they would understand, like, what that actually means because it's kind of like it doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah. So, this has definitely been a challenging time for us. I mean, obviously, like, our hearts go out to the families and the specific school, and, we really just wanted to talk about it and kind of, honor Mason, and I believe I cannot say his last name, but I will put the link up. I just don't wanna butcher his last name. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. But his name, I believe, is Schermerhorn, Mason Schermerhorn. I really hope I got that right because, I'm not great at names. But his, GoFundMe is available online, and, we put a tinyurl.com/Apalachee Strong, link because the GoFundMe link is a bunch of nonsense and hard to remember. So for those of you who are listening, you could go to tinyurl.com/Apalachee Strong, and then that will link you directly to his family's GoFundMe if you would like to contribute in some way. Um, they, are obviously heartbroken. And this is just something that we really felt we had to talk about. Um, it's rough. It's rough because, like, I am now honestly quite seriously considering homeschooling for our kids. I mean, I guess we were kind of thinking about it before just because of the challenge of really teaching a, like, twice exceptional child, like a child who has special needs but is also really smart or intellectual. Like, she has a high IQ, but she has a lot of social issues and other deficits
Behavioral
because of the
challenges.
autism.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, both of them do. So we were already kind of grappling with the idea of potentially homeschooling, but I feel like this event has really kind of pushed us over that line a bit. I feel like next year we probably will kinda have no choice but to homeschool. And I don't know about you, Matt, have you joined any of the local Facebook communities? Maybe not, maybe it's more of like a mom thing, but I have definitely noticed since that event happened, there's been a huge increase in our local community of homeschoolers. Like, a ton of people are pulling their kids out of school now and homeschooling.
So I know you had mentioned I'm not in any, like, homeschooling, like, groups online. So, I mean, I'm not really aware of, like, people trying to transition out of, the school system. Um, it just it's hard because, like, I don't wanna say, like, the special needs are kind of almost, like, forgotten a little bit in some of these, like, emergency situations, but it it seems like there's I don't know if it's just, like, the resources to, like, assist, it's potentially, like, lacking a little bit, so, like, it's
Yeah,
I don't I mean, but again, I'm not really sure how you would possibly, like, address it, though, like,
yeah,
it's not like a, like, "Oh, like, we'll just give them an extra person, like a like, an individual person with them," like, yes, that would help, but, like, you would you would still struggle in that area given the circumstances anyway, so it's like I really scratch my head because 'cause I'm like, I'm not really sure what the best case scenario is. I don't know how schools would address it even if they had every opportunity and resource to address it. Like,
yeah.
it's just a hard situation.
The good thing is that our local community has done an outstanding job with responding to this. Not just people supporting families, but like our local sheriff's department has increased security at all our schools. Like, our kids' school has like a resource officer there, like pacing outside the main entry at all times now. So I do feel safer. Um, but I do think that this is just a temporary Band-Aid. I feel like as time goes by, all those resources will disappear again, and
Right.
then what?
I did notice when I was picking up our girls, for therapy today in the middle of the day, like, when you push, like, the little, doorbell button and it goes to, like, the front office, they're like, "Yes, can we help you?" And I had to, like, say, like, an, like, entire phrase of, like, what my purpose was being the school saying, like, "Oh, I'm picking up this child and this child for therapy. It's scheduled at this time. Like, I had to go through, like, a whole, like,
That's
series of
good.
yeah. So, like, because usually, like, I'll, like, push the button, I'll say, like, my name, "Oh, I'm picking up, my kids," and they just ring the door or they unlock the door and I'm in. But I had to, like, say, like, my name, who the children were that I was picking up, what was the purpose of me, like, picking them up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, like, kind of like a mini, like, interrogation, but, I mean, I would much rather that because, like, obviously, like, at least it, like, slows down the process where, like, if you were to try to catch someone off guard, they might not be able to list off kids' names real quick and the reason that you're at the school should you have something like nefarious that you're planning on doing to the school. So I do appreciate like at least they're kind of going through trying to like stall people coming into the school a little bit by asking like more questions than they normally do.
Yeah, definitely. It also made me think about like, well, what can we do if our kids ever like an emergency situation and we can't really do anything? You really don't know what it feels like to be helpless until you don't have your kids on you and something like that's happening. Like, I have never felt so helpless to help my kids in my whole life than knowing that this was happening and they are not with me. Like that, I just don't like the idea of that happening again. Like, that's, I think, what's really kind of pushing me towards homeschooling because what do you do? Like, I have all these plans. Like, if something were to happen and my kids are at home with me and somebody breaks into my house, like, we have plans for that. We're like, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. But, like, okay, what if they're not with you? They're in somebody else's care in another building and you have no access to it. Now what? You just, like, hope that things go okay? So, like, I'm not comfortable with that at all. As great intentions as everyone there has, I know the reality is that, like, most schools are under-resourced, they don't have enough stuff to go around. Like, I know our local area is not doing great with staffing, like, across the whole country, there's issues getting people into positions. There's just not enough people applying for jobs, whether that's at schools or at your local sheriff's department or wherever it may be. There's not enough people filling these positions.
Right.
So that alone concerns me. And I feel like that's enough to kind of make me think, I don't know, is this going to be our last year going to a
I mean, it,
public
it
school?
could be like, I mean, I was curious to see like if there's going to be like a huge like community like outreach or like a like where they kind of say like, "Hey, we need to increase, like, sheriff or local law enforcement numbers, like, this is a, like, community, like, effort, like, please, if you're able and willing to even be, like, a volunteer or any or help in the community any capacity, please, like, consider." I mean, that might be something. Maybe there's an individual who's kind of been on the fence, like, if they want to be in law enforcement or a firefighter, EMT, anything along those lines, and they're just, like, waiting for something to kind of come across, and then that might pull some people in. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a struggle all around, both schools, law enforcement, EMT. I mean, everything.
Yeah, I think what this did for me is kind of open my eyes to the need for emergency plans and emergency strategies for autistic and special needs individuals in schools. Like, what is the strategy? What is it that staff are being told to do with the special needs kids? Is there something in IEPs? Like, is this something that we would now approach in an IEP meeting and say, "Hey, I would like an emergency plan put into my student's IEP." Like, how do you approach something like this? I feel like there may or may not be specialized training. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information, but if not, I feel like there needs to be specialized training for staff on supporting autistic people during these
Crisis
sorts of crisis
situations.
events. Yeah, I mean, particularly because their specific disability can make things worse for not just themselves, but everyone else. So I
Right.
feel like there needs to be some sort of emergency plan for that. But I mean, I remember reading a story on LinkedIn from a professional, and she was disabled. She was a wheelchair user. And she was talking about how there was like an emergency drill at her, I think it was either her work or school. I believe it was her work. And she said that during that emergency drill, she was using her wheelchair to get out, but there was a part of the building she couldn't get out of, and she said that she got stuck and she had to stay in the building during the drill, and they went outside, did the head count, did all that stuff, got cleared, came back in, and then they realized she was still in there. And I'm like, "Wow, that's horrifying."
Right.
That is absolutely horrifying to me to think that my kid could be the disabled kid who was left there and, God knows what can happen to them because there aren't any specific plans in place for the disabled or those in the disability community. So that's definitely something that's been on my mind more, and I feel like it's something that I will probably have to, I guess, at least ask the school about. Like, is there a plan for this? Or is this something that I need to bring up in an IEP meeting? I don't know. I don't know.
But I mean, right, I mean, with the IEP meeting, the hard thing there is we don't even know how they would respond in emergencies. Like our own kids would respond in an emergency. Like if there's like a siren, alarm, anything, like we can assume they'd be covering their ears. They might be screaming, like they would probably be panicked. But if they're being asked to leave the classroom to go into the gym or something, would they be able to follow quickly walking in line? Would they sit down and like be like fussy? Like we really don't know what they would be like depending on any given day, the environment, anything like that. So I mean, it's all guesswork until you actually put them through some type of drill or something.
Yeah. I mean, we know how our kids responded to just a fire drill. Like,
Right.
that did not go well, and they had to go through years of practicing and multiple fire drills to be able to do those okay without having a complete meltdown and, like, eloping. Now they
Right.
can do it, but it took a while to process that. So to me, I'm like, I know they would not handle something like this well. So I know that the schools do, like active shooter drills. I know that they do that, and they have said, "Oh, your kids handle that well," etcetera. Which, yes, but that's a contained situation that is not at all realistic to the real situation and the amount of sensory overload that would happen, what they would see, experience, hear, smell during that time. So that's something that I never really thought I would really truly have to deeply think about. But in light of what has happened, it is now something that's like on the forefront of our minds. And I feel like has really changed everything for us now.
Well, because the big thing is, I think for like these active shooter drills, what they're basically just practicing is can you shelter in place? It's no different than like basically like a tornado drill, I would assume. Um, but the problem is during an active shooter drill, you're not always going to be sheltering in place. Like sometimes you might be trying to run to an escape route. Like sheltering in place is step two, not step one. So I don't know. It seems like depending on the circumstance, they could be practicing one thing, but when it actually happens, they're doing something totally different. So you can prepare for one scenario with the special needs kids sheltering in place, which is the easy thing to do potentially, um, versus something that might not even be taking place.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an episode we never thought we were going to do. It's one we felt like we had to do. So I know it's not the most fun of episodes, but we thought it was really important. I just want to remind you all again, if you want to support Mason's family, I have that link up on the screen. If you're listening, it's tinyurl.com/Apalachee Strong. If you cannot find it for whatever reason, just Google his name. It will come up because it is all over the internet now. So yeah, I just want to thank you all for tuning in, especially for an episode that is not as lighthearted as usual, not our usual. And I want to invite you all, if you have any thoughts to share, please do so. Leave us a comment on our Facebook or YouTube page at Autism Wish. Let us know what you're thinking about. Has this impacted any of you? Are there any of you listening who are in our local community and have really felt this impact? Are there any of you across the nation or across the globe who have heard about this, and what are your thoughts? Um, just let us know again, YouTube or Facebook at Autism Wish, and we will keep tabs on that. We are still lying low a little bit this week, but thanks for tuning in. And remember to hold your kids tight. Remember that together we can build a safer, more inclusive environment for our kids. And at the end of the day, that's really the goal. Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you next time.
See
Bye.
you next time. Bye.